What makes an excellent leader? And are they really that scarce? And what do they do to merit such exceptional compensation? Welcome to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. Your host is one of the world's leading experts on international leadership. She's a master certified coach and facilitates a mastermind for CEOs of international companies. She's the author of 3 books, Abrasive Leaders, Global Nomadic Leaders, and Managing Brilliant Jerks. She has worked with Nestle, Novartis, and even the United Nations. She's especially good at helping executives fast track to the C-suite. Welcome, Dr. Katrina Burrus.
Welcome to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Katrina Burrus, and today we're going to interview Ben Easter. Ben, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Katrina. I appreciate you having me.
So I just want to say to our listeners that I'm in Southern California and I don't have my usual gear, so please be forgiving on the sound. But this was a nice opportunity to interview Ben, and I didn't want to leave it till later. So here we are. So Ben, tell us a little bit. When you develop a business, you often you can feel overwhelmed, stuck. You can procrastinate by fear. You can feel burnout or the imposter syndrome. So what do you recommend how to handle this?
Well, each one of those maybe has a slightly different flavor of kind of stuckness, but I will say that the first thing I always want to look at with clients is what's the mindset? Like, how are we thinking about this situation that you're facing? Because usually we can find that there are some technical challenges that come up in business, but most of the time, these things that you're talking about, the overwhelm, the procrastination, the stuckness, these things are coming because we're thinking about our business or our life in some way that might not be resourceful or give us access to all of the resources that we have and we can bring to bear. So the first thing that I always want to check in is how are you thinking about this? What thoughts are you thinking that when you think them, you're not feeling motivated or you're feeling overwhelmed or, you're feeling stuck or whatever that it might be?
Okay, so you mentioned changing the mindset. And can you expand on that a little bit, how you help your clients?
Yeah, totally. So let's take one of the examples, overwhelm. So overwhelm is this feeling that there's just too much to do, too little time, we'll never get it all done. And it's a very energy draining kind of thought pattern that's happening. So if I'm talking to a client who's experiencing overwhelm, the first thing that I want to do is kind of ask the question, what's going on with this overwhelm? Like what's going on in your business such that you're feeling overwhelmed? Because I want to know, if they say oh, well, there's just too many things to do. So maybe we're going to actually take a look at what are the things that you need to do, and do you need to be doing all of the first question I think that can be really useful for overwhelm is what happens if you stop doing it? I don't know if you've read the book Essentialism, but that's one of the questions. What happens if you just stop doing this thing and what would happen? What would blow up? Would anything blow up? Would people even notice? And a lot of times going through the things that are on the quote unquote to-do list to get clear on if I just dropped this, what would happen can clear up a lot of the items on the to-do list. Okay. But let's say that we've done that and we're like, nope, all of the things that are on my to-do list, they absolutely have to be done in order for the business to continue to run the way that it's running. Cool. Well, now the question I'm going to get curious about is what are the ones that you're kind of two sides of it? What is your brilliance? What are the ones that are easy, effortless, that when you're doing them, you actually feel energized? And by the way, Katrina, if the answer is none of them, then I'm going to get really curious about why are we even doing this thing in the world, right? But most people don't have that experience. Most people, they started their business because there was something energizing about it for them. And so get really clear on that, kind of almost make 2 columns. What are the things that you're really energized by? And what are the things that really drain you? And when you're feeling really drained, those things are taking you probably longer to do. We're probably not doing them as well as we could be doing if we were energized by them, right? And so we're having this slowdown and quality loss. And so sometimes we then get to ask the question who else could be doing this, which I think is a really useful question. And a lot of times, depending on the stage of your business, you might stress about the resources to bring somebody on to do that thing. But what happens is when you start to eliminate these things off of your plate, that are energy drainers. And that could be, again, from somebody else doing it. It could be from an optimization where we make it a more efficient process, or it could be an automation where we don't actually have to do it at all. Like Calendly is an amazing thing for scheduling, right? So I can just send a link to somebody and we can now have a thing that we don't have to have a back and forth where now there's an email that's off my plate, right? So we can automate, we can optimize, or we can outsource or offload and roll somebody else to do the thing. And that's like a really useful way to handle overwhelm at a high level, in a nutshell.
Yes, no, we're asking the nutshell, which is great. How would you differ in your approach for the imposter syndrome?
Oh yeah, imposter syndrome is a real big one, right? Because people are telling the story that like, they're going to find out. I got here by luck. I got here by accident. And if only they knew, they would know that I'm actually like a fraud, right? And I think this is a really interesting thing because of how many, I work with a lot of high-powered entrepreneurs, and I'm amazed at how many of them are telling some version of the same story.
Yes, and I've had that in my experience coaching executives or CEOs of companies even. Oh my.
Right. Like they're going to find out. And it's like, there's kind of two ways to approach it. But one, I like to remember that this is a really common experience, because I think that kind of takes some of the power away from it. Like Maya Angelou is my favorite example of this. She, wrote how many books, and she said before everyone was published, she's like, this is the one. This is where they're going to find out that I was a fraud the whole time. And she just made it on a quarter. I just saw the other day. You know what I mean? And so it's like, what does it really mean to be an imposter? Are you believing that you could somehow fool the universe and wind up in a situation that you weren't meant to wind up in? Because if you feel really aligned with what you're doing, and this is one way that I really like to think about imposter syndrome. Are you the kind of person who really enjoys doing what you're doing, and then you've created results from doing that work? Then how can you possibly be an imposter? Now, obviously, we're doing a nutshell here because there's like thoughts and feelings that it's important for people to really work through to be able to see this clearly, to really be able to buy this story. But at its essence, imposter syndrome is telling the story that you could somehow hoodwink the universe or reality or existence, physics.
Very good. Great. Okay, I'm going to go for another one. What about procrastination?
Procrastination is a good one. This winds up being a big problem for a lot of people, especially early on in business. But I've found that procrastination basically boils down to one of three situations. And those three situations are either we don't believe that the thing is possible for us. So we don't believe that no matter how much action we take, that we'll actually be able to get the result that we're looking for. Number two, we don't know, maybe we believe that it's possible, but we don't know exactly how to do it. We're not clear on what the exact steps are to get there from here to there. Or number three, it's out of values alignment for us. And so when I say values, I'm not talking about like the way that people traditionally talk about company values or like personal values, where we say like my values are family and my work ethic and things like that. I'm talking about the core drivers for us, like the things that actually move us in reality, that are motivational in and of themselves. Like we never need to like try to motivate ourselves to live our values, because we just do it automatically. The things that you do throughout your day, they're in alignment with your values. That's how you know. And so if we're approaching something and we are not sure if it's ever going to work for us, like we really don't believe that no matter how much action we take, it's going to result in things or the outcome that we're looking for, then that's going to create a situation where our brain is hardwired to stop us from taking that action, right? Because it's here to do two jobs: keep us alive and help us conserve resources so that we can stay alive longer. So it's really doing you a favor, right? And if this is the reason that we're procrastinating, then we need to figure our way to a belief that it's possible. Okay, and we can do that through modeling others who have created it. We can do it through modeling a process that we've used in other areas of our lives. So something else where you're already really good at getting some kind of result, and say like, what are the steps that it takes for me to do that thing over here? And can I apply those steps to this situation, almost like a metaphor, or to again, to research, to read, to find what are the strategies where I can believe that anybody in any situation could go through these steps and get through to the other side and have a creation, which can also start to solve that second problem, right? Because if the question is, I do believe that it's possible for me, but I don't know how to do it. Well, this is where, again, modeling is really useful. Find somebody else who's done it and ask yourself, what steps did they go through to get this? Where do I get started? And if you don't know what those steps are, great, that's the first place. Step number one, go research until you find the steps, right? And then you can try it on yourself and see what works and what doesn't. But getting yourself into action is going to be key for that one. And then values alignment, this one's tricky because if it's actually out of values alignment for us, well, maybe it's not actually useful for us to do it. And this is where, like, if it's really important for the business that something gets done, but it's out of values alignment for you, this is where we can bring on somebody else to do it.
Yes,
Either
absolutely.
enroll somebody else.
So what about, burnout? Burnout can be very debilitating for the person, where they can't even function and they have to leave office or work for quite some time. They sometimes change careers. So if you have a client that's in burnout, what do you suggest?
Yeah. So again, it's going to be exploring with the particular client what their situation is, because the first thing that I always want to check with burnout is, how are we managing our resources? So, like, are you actually getting enough sleep? Are you actually eating enough foods that are going to fuel you for what you're trying to do? Are you moving your body enough to, like, make sure that your metabolism is mobilizing the food that you are eating? So checking physical resources is actually really a useful step before we go to the psychological side of things, right? I just want to know, like, are you sleeping enough? Are you eating enough? Are you moving enough? If all those things are in place and we're still feeling burnout, I love that this comes right on the end of the procrastination one, because chances are you've been white knuckling your way through something that's out of values alignment for you. And so I really want to get clear on, what are you feeling burned out about? Because, the example that I like to go to is, I don't know if you've ever had the experience, Katrina, where you're already kind of tired maybe, and you went to this party or something like that, a gathering of people, and maybe you weren't feeling your best, or you weren't feeling like you really had a ton of energy. And then you find yourself in a conversation with somebody where you're just fascinated with the topic, right? And all of a sudden, all of that fatigue that you were experiencing, all of the low resources that you were experiencing, they're out the window. Yeah, and you're energized, and you feel like you could talk to this person, and you wind up having a conversation late into the night, maybe, that you wouldn't have thought at the beginning of the night that you ever would have been able to do or would have wanted to. You were planning on getting out of there, and after you make a round of hellos and leaving after 45 minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
nice example. I'm going to flip the table on you and ask, okay, the business is doing really well, and you're really a bit bored with your job and even complacent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the reverse. You've really done well and bored. Nothing's new.
Yeah. So I love Mihai Csikszentmihalyi has a really great framework for this.
Cheney. I know he's so hard to pronounce.
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it, but it's Flow. He recently passed, actually.
Unfortunately, what a good tourist. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. And he has a really great model for this in that book, Flow, I think, which is, anytime you're experiencing anxiety, it's because you are in a situation where your skills aren't up to the challenge. And anytime you're experiencing boredom, it's because your challenge isn't up to your skills. And so if you're feeling bored, unenthused by your day-to-day, chances are you're not experiencing enough challenge.
Yes, and they give an example I've heard is like Federer, who's we're very proud as Swiss to have a world champion tennis player. And it says, look, okay, Federer might retire and he starts playing with people that are less skilled to him. And then finally, his tennis decreases because he's not focused, he's not concentrated, he's not challenged, and therefore even loses his top-notch skills with time.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're not sharpening the saw and actually using it for something resourceful, like something that is challenging for you to do. So if you're bored, I mean, one thing that is cool about that is now you have some resources to play with, right? So to find out a way to use those resources to really challenge yourself, I think is the prescription there.
Would you compare and contrast that with being complacent, that is happy with what you're doing and not really Or would you say it's the same thing? If you're complacent, you're not really challenged anymore?
Oh, I love this question because I think there's a different flavor here. Because if you're bored, the way that most people are using that word is to describe a negative relationship with their reality, right? They're actually not enjoying being bored. Very few people say, gosh, I hope I am bored today. Like I would really love to be bored, right? Whereas complacency, I mean, is that really that bad? I think of like the idea of having a life where you feel like you're in kind of in flow all the time, and there's not really anywhere to be other than where you are. And I wonder, like, isn't that what we're all, wouldn't it be nice to live in a world where you don't feel like you need to be anywhere other than where you are? And so complacency has that tone to me. Now, if you're having a negative experience with complacency, then that's something that we can have a conversation about.
Yeah,
Right?
complacent can be also where you don't feel as challenged as you used to be, and you're content with the situation. Therefore, you're not seeking to continuously evolve.
Exactly. Yeah. Because if you're complacent, that's what I'm saying. I believe that complacency has with it this feeling of contentness. And if we're content, what's there to fix it? They say if it ain't broken, don't fix it.
Okay, that's a different perspective. Good.
Yeah.
So come to our next. What do you do with clients that have a fear of failure or fear of being rejected?
Yeah. So those are slightly different flavors on the same thing, but I think fear of failure is really natural for humans. Fear of rejection is really natural for humans because, evolutionarily, if we got rejected, our ancestors got rejected, then they died. You didn't get to keep living and pass on your genes if you got rejected out of the tribe, so to speak. And so that's like, and they say that that's like the number one fear that people experience is public speaking or being like, because it's getting rejected en masse. And so there's a couple ways to think about this. One is like failure. If anything that we want to do in our lives, anything that we want to succeed at, it's necessarily going to have failure as part of it. Because most people, they're thinking some version of this. If only I could learn the right steps to take, then I would be able to get to success without failing. And the fact is, it would be nice if that were the truth, but I like to use the example of learning to walk in this. So, like when kids are learning to walk, and it's so fun to be around a child learning to walk because they're just like so like immune to failure, it seems. They will keep falling over and over and over again, right? And what's interesting is that part of why we're not able to walk is because we literally don't have the muscles that we need to walk. And so what happens when you fall over and you get back up? Well, you're doing a squat, right?
That's right. Good.
Yeah. And so in a
analogy.
In a very real way, in a very direct way, we don't learn to walk despite falling over. We learn to walk because we fall over. And so to imagine to yourself that you can become successful at something without falling your way through it is just something of a lie with reality. You're out of sync with reality. I mean, we could come up with millions of examples of this, but it's why everyone in all the literature is always saying fail fast. Because the quicker you can get yourself to go through that failure process, the quicker you can necessarily develop the muscles that you need to succeed. It's how we even learn what success is in some ways, is through failure.
Right. But some cultures don't accept failure. It's losing face. It's you won't get even in the business, you won't get the funds you needed if you've gone bankrupt. While here in America, it's much more, let's say, open-minded, more entrepreneurial. I'm generalizing horribly, but let's say the laws of even getting money is easier here after bankruptcy.
Yeah, which is a great point. And then now we're going to talk about what kinds of failures then to experience and how do we create a place where we can experience the failures that are necessary. So the thing about it is it's not like we can avoid failure. All we can do is pretend to avoid failure. So the example that I'd use here is like a lottery winner, right? The fact is most lottery winners go back to being as poor or if not poorer than they were before they won the lottery within 5 years. And that's because they didn't actually learn the skills that they needed to develop wealth. They were just handed it, right? And so,
Okay, no. You got to explain that a little bit. Or you mean they just handed it in the lottery where you buy your ticket and they didn't have to learn anything in the process? Is that what you mean, or what?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're just handed the wealth through the lottery ticket, right? In fact, they're showing that they're the kind of person who buys lottery tickets, which, the math isn't really great. That's not a great investment for most people to buy lottery tickets, right? Some people get lucky, but then we know that the statistics are that they're going to go back to being, they're very likely, highly likely to go back to being as poor, if not more poor.
I see. They can't handle the money because they've never really earned it.
They didn't actually learn to walk. It would be like somebody like building a contraption for a kid to walk for them, right? It's okay while the contraption is on, but if you ever take the contraption off, the kid can't walk because they never developed the muscles that they needed.
I see your
right.
point. Yeah.
Yeah. So we can tell this story that we can avoid failure, but ultimately, like, it's probably pretty detrimental to think that, or to take away from people the opportunity to fail, or this story that failure is to be avoided at all costs. But that doesn't mean that, because some failures are actually catastrophic failures. Like you make a mistake crossing the street and you could die, and then you don't get to play the game anymore, right? And so creating a safe space, and this is where I think play is very useful, or like understanding, like models, financial models, game models, where we can fail in a safe way, right? Like the example of Monopoly, for instance, as a game is really useful, because you have this game where we're going to pretend, part of what makes the play is that we're going to pretend that we're all real estate barons while we're playing this game, and that this is real money, not just colored pieces of paper. And because of that, we get to take risks in ways that we might if we were playing with real money, right? But we have a safe space to do it so that we don't die or we don't go bankrupt when we have that experience, right? So yeah. I think that it's really useful to find safe places to fail.
You make a good point there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so tell us about people that love to please other people. Where is the energy going, and what would you recommend these people-pleasing people?
Yeah, this is a big challenge because, many people are motivated by kindness, and so we tell this story that, like, the kind thing to do is to do what other people are asking us to do, and that's an important part of, like, being human. The challenge that we get here is one of authenticity, because you can do this for a long time and wind up in a life that you're not very satisfied with because you've always been living for other people's values rather than prioritizing your own. This is another, going back to the burnout question, this is another one of the things that creates a lot of the experience of burnout, is because you're saying yes to other people all the time, no matter what they're asking you for, and deriving your sense of self-identity and self-meaning from what other people are asking you, and your ability to kind of show up and deliver that. And this can be a really challenging one to kind of work through for people, because there's a real resistance to wanting to let people down, or, this is the story that you're going to disappoint people or let them down, and that it's going to mean something about us. So in order to, like, overcome it, I think one really useful mindset tweak to understand is that because look, we're burning ourselves out, right? Like, there's the classic example of you put your mask on yourself on the airplane first before you help small children, right? And the reason that they do that, and the reason this is such an important metaphor, is because if you don't do that, you'll die, and then you can't help anybody else, right? And so if contributing to other people is something that's really important to you in your reality, doing it in a way that's in alignment for you with your values, and again, those core drivers for you and what's important to you, is going to be crucial, because if you don't, you're going to wind up out of power in your life, and you're going to wind up, metaphorically dying, if not actually dying. Like, a lot of people get real diseases and sickness from this overwhelm, or from this burnout, right? Actual physical traumas happen.
It's serious. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it can be very serious. I mean, you look at the example of, like, driving a car. If you're really exhausted and you're driving a car, you might make a decision that, again, could cost you your life, could cost you your health. So connecting the dots there for people, where we understand that we actually can't give of ourselves indefinitely, because we have to be filling up our own cup in order to be able to share.
Right. So you also teach them how to live with aligned to their values, and also to set boundaries, so that when it's not aligned, they are able to say no, which is probably one of the hardest things for them to do.
Exactly. And to link that back up to something that's actually really important, which is their ability to help more people with whom they do have values alignment, right? Because that's what we really want in the world, is to see our values grow and grow and grow, right? To be more aligned. And so connecting the dots between like, I'm not actually saying no to you. I'm saying yes to my values because I want to see those grow. And I want to conserve my energy for investing in the things that are the most important to me in the world.
I just noticed that we've passed the time for our podcast, but it was very interesting and very helpful, I'm sure, to our listeners. Thank you very much, Ben. I appreciate
absolutely. Thank you.
Time and sharing your knowledge and with all our listeners.
Totally. Time flies when we're having a good conversation.
Yep. Take care. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
We would love to know what you thought of this podcast. Write us an email at drkatrina with a K at excellentexecutivecoaching.com. We would love to hear what you liked and what we could improve. This podcast has been sponsored by excellentexecutivecoaching.com.
Thank you for listening to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. You can subscribe to all future podcasts at excellentexecutivecoaching.com. Join us each Wednesday to learn more about the latest trends in leadership techniques and bring your coaching to the next level. To learn more about Dr. Burrus' CEO Mastermind, use the contact form at excellentexecutivecoaching.com.